adjust this. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. What an incredible range of speakers. I feel so jealous for all the students that are at your school, that you guys think so creatively about how you teach them. It's very exciting to hear about. So I'm Clare Sutcliffe. I'm Exec Director of Communities and Outreach at the Raspberry Pi Foundation and co-founder of Code Club. And if neither of those things mean anything to you now, I hope they do by the time I've finished speaking. So I'm here to talk to you about digital making. And I think that digital making is learning about technology through making with it. It's an opportunity to learn through hands-on work that fosters creativity and curiosity, and uses innovation through messing about, building, designing, hacking, and making. And it doesn't include checking your emails. It doesn't include browsing a website or using an application. They're digital, but they're just not making. And so I think between the technical and the creative is a very interesting intersection where young people make useful projects with technology. In 2015, an organization in the UK called Nesta undertook a survey of 10,000 people, including young people, to study the attitudes and opportunities for digital creativity across the UK. And I'm going to go into some of the findings from that survey now, and hopefully they're interesting and insightful for you. So what do young people like to make? They like to make apps, and they like to make games and animations and music and software, and they like to make digital images and film. There's a huge array of interesting projects. And they were looking at how confident young people are with digital making. So 68% of young people are confident about digital making, with boys being more so than girls. 82% are interested in digital making. Again, boys more interested than girls. And what I thought was quite interesting is that parents themselves are interested in digital making. Again, with men more interested than women. Why do young people take part in digital making? Mainly because it's fun, and that is so heartwarming to hear. But they also find technology interesting. They think it's going to be useful for jobs of the future. But interestingly, only 13% say they want to make money out of it. I don't think it's quite clicked that skills involved in digital making will help them considerably to make a successful career. And what words do young people associate with digital making? Overly 90% were positive terms, so creative and smart and interesting and cool and fun. It's got a little bit of an image problem. People think it's a bit nerdy and geeky. Hopefully we can do something to change that. And the gender differences in boys and girls are actually quite interesting about how they see themselves in relation to technology. So girls have much more of a concern about being seen to be nerdy or geeky than boys do. I'm not entirely sure what we do about that, but I think it's an interesting problem. Quite interestingly, 33% of girls like making because they find technology interesting and they like making new things. And what about parents' attitudes to digital making? So 89% think it's a worthwhile activity. 84% think it's important for careers and jobs. 74% would specifically encourage a career in digital making. 99% think computing is important and should be taught in schools. But only 12% of parents could signpost their child to digital making activities, either online or face-to-face. I wonder if you agree with me that that is a bit of a problem. So why is digital making important? So in the UK, there's currently a lack of making with technology skills. Half those questioned by that same report make things less than once a week or never. So what I'm thinking is if parents are interested in digital making and students are interested and confident about digital making, how come it's such a small percentage of people who are actually doing it? And I think that's a real problem to work on. So in between, there's a sort of interesting cross-section in between STEAM subjects. I'm going to assume that you know what those are. Is that right? Yeah. and making is a really interesting intersection, and that's where we work at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and I want to tell you a bit about that work now and see if it's helpful to you. So the Raspberry Pi Foundation is a charity based in the UK but operating internationally. The founders of the charity invented a very small computer called the Raspberry Pi, which I have one here, and I'll go into more detail in a minute. And the sales of those computers, the profit from that goes back into our educational work. It's our mission to put the power of digital making into the hands of people all over the world. And we think that is absolutely essential so that people are capable of understanding and shaping an increasingly digital world, able to solve problems that matter to them and their community, and they're equipped for jobs of the future. As I said, the founders of the Raspberry Pi Foundation invented a small computer called the Raspberry Pi, which has new model iterations ongoing. This computer costs $35, which is incredibly cheap, and it's also, because it's so small, incredibly portable. It's really good for doing physical computing, so you can attach all different kinds of things to this and program those. So on the screen there, you can see a camera module next to the Raspberry Pi and a Sense hat as well. And these are some of the projects that you can do with the Raspberry Pi. So up in the top corner, we have people making music with code through a program called Sonic Pi, which runs on the Raspberry Pi. We have made nature cameras, a bit of an invasion of privacy of nature there, sorry about that, but where we can use a motion sensing camera to take photographs of nature as it goes about its business. And then we have moisture sensors. So we can tell when a plant needs watering, and we can ask it to essentially water itself, which is quite handy. I mentioned the Sense hat earlier. So the Sense hat is a board that attaches to the Raspberry Pi, and it senses humidity, it senses where it is in space. And there are 2 Raspberry Pis with Sense hat attached on the International Space Station. And what we do is we run competitions where young people write experiments, and we run their code on Raspberry Pis on the International Space Station, and they can run experiments in space. So a good example of one of these was called Sweaty Astronaut, and it was a crew detector. And so every time the moisture level rose when a member of the crew went past, it would take a photo. There was a lot of photographs of astronauts' arms, but it was an interesting experiment. We write lots of projects and resources to get started using your Raspberry Pi, but also for general computing lessons as well. And so one of the major pieces of our work is helping people bring digital making to their own community. And we run 2 major programs to do that. The first is Code Club, which is a worldwide network of volunteer-led extracurricular coding clubs for children aged roughly 9 to 11. And how they work is a volunteer will go to their local public venue, like a school or a library or a community center, and they will take projects that we've written, and they will work with a group of 15 to 20 children once a week over a term or maybe a year, and that's what makes a code club. This is what a code club looks like in the UK, although it looks quite similar in other places around the world. 40% of the students that attend code club are girls. We've made a conscious choice not to try and specifically encourage girls, but to keep code club as gender neutral as possible and make the content appealing to girls without having to pinkify it. So there are currently 4,500 active code clubs running in the UK at the moment, teaching about 65,000 children a term. And then another 2,500 code clubs running outside the UK in another 120 countries. And in several of those countries, we work with specific organizations to grow the Code Club activity in that country. So there is a Code Club Australia organization, Code Club New Zealand, Code Club Brazil, and they work to grow the number of code clubs in those countries. So we teach using lots of different languages, but these are the three main ones. So you will have heard of Scratch, no doubt, HTML, CSS, and Python. And each one of our projects teaches the basics of how to build something, and then there are lots of challenges to stretch students in their abilities. And up here I've put some of the projects that we make using HTML and CSS. All of these projects are available for free online. Many of them are translated. I think there are 17 different languages so far, but they're all translated by volunteers. So if you don't see one in your language, then please feel free to help me out and translate some of them. And so if you find Code Club interesting, obviously there's a lot more information online, but there are some things that you can do to help. You could volunteer to start a club at your school or at a public venue or corporate space. If you're not at a school and you're in a corporate, you could help get a Code Club started by sponsoring, donating equipment or space. And if you're feeling super ambitious, you can help start a Code Club organization in your country. And we're doing that through social franchising. So this means it allows our country partners to lead locally and for us to focus on sharing our knowledge and expertise. It means we can scale more quickly and adapt to local contexts. So we provide onboarding training and continuous support for those leaders, exclusive rights to operate in that region, high quality materials, assets, and website, and access to the rest of our network of country leaders. So to be clear, anyone in the world can start a Code Club, but we work with one particular organization per country to do things like run the website and act as a central point for the community in that country. And here's a URL for you if you're interested in finding out a bit more about Code Club around the world. The second community project that we run at Raspberry Pi is called a Raspberry Jam. So just in case that pun is not obvious, I'm using, there are so many puns at Raspberry Pi you would not even believe. So a jam is where people come together and traditionally they play musical instruments, and it can sound a bit messy, but lots of the time a wonderful creative result is made. And it's the same with a Raspberry Jam. So a Raspberry Jam is a group of people who are interested in using the Raspberry Pi to make interesting projects, and they come together to talk about that. They run workshops, they give talks, they share their experience and knowledge. This is a Raspberry Jam happening in Manchester in the UK. This particular jam runs every 2 months. There are about 40 people attending that. Some are children, as you can see, some are adults, there'll be beginners, there'll be advanced, but the point is that everybody's helping each other learn more. There are about 300 jam events around the world each year at the moment. You can see clusters around America and around Europe. I think that's mainly because that's where the market for Raspberry Pis is most buoyant at the moment, but I'm hoping that it will grow around the world too. And then we've written a lot of projects that do and don't use the Raspberry Pi and are also all available for free on the Raspberry Pi website. If you look in the education section, you'll see lots and lots of different projects there. Some are short, some are long, some are for beginners, some are advanced, but you should be able to search through those and find ones that are interesting and appropriate for you. And again, here's a URL for you if you want to find out more about running a Raspberry Jam. What I like most about these two examples, although I might be a little bit biased because I work on them, is that I think they're really good examples of informal learning environments. So they teach digital skills through making. So you're always working on a project, you've got a focus, and you're creating something. They're opt-in, so you're harnessing the natural enthusiasm of the attendee at the event. And they're driven by the individual learner, so it's whatever the learner is interested in, that's what they're focusing on. It's led by volunteers in the community, so there's a really nice way for people who maybe have more advanced skills to give back to their own local community. And most of all, that it's sociable and it's fun for attendees, which is what the survey told us was most important. I think I'm about done, actually, so I hope that's been useful and that you know a little bit more about the Raspberry Pi Foundation and the work that we do. I have a Raspberry Pi with me here, obviously, and I have lots more information, and please come and talk to me after this speech and in the drink session, and I'd love to chat to you. Thank you very much.